It all started on a Tuesday morning, one of those warm, dull ones, when the sky is too clear to look natural, and the air smells of freshly cut grass, mixed with promises of trouble. For a few days now, I've been noticing strange movements on the side of my plot. People coming and going with clipboards, straight-brimmed caps and tape measures. I thought it was work on the neighboring house. I stayed away. You learn over time that in neighborhoods like mine, the less you ask, the less you're pulled into the insanity. But on that particular day, I heard a different sound, a buzzing sound that seemed to be coming from underground, as if a colony of termites had decided to stage a rave. I went out with my coffee still in my hand, slippers dragging, and went to see what was going on. I didn't have to walk far. On the right-hand side of my plot, there were two men bent over a hole that barely fit the two of them. One of them was holding a giant drill, the other, a bucket of wet earth. All around, stakes with colored ribbons delimited the space, as if it were an archaeological dig. In the corner, a makeshift sign with the words, "Emergency Catchment Well, authorized by HOA. My blood ran hot. I called out to one of the men, trying to maintain the civilized tone of someone who still believes he's living in a functioning society. Who authorized that? The guy, sweating and with a mud-stained shirt, pointed at the sign with his chin and said, "HOA, it's all right." At that moment, I took a deep breath, very deep, because it was obvious that the president of the association had a hand in this madness. That woman who turned any basic civil action into a moral crusade. The same woman who tried to ban artificial grass for harming the visual harmony of the ecosystem, and who launched an entire newsletter just to warn residents about the acoustic risks of poorly lubricated gate hinges. I went straight to the archives, got a copy of the land purchase contract, which had been reviewed by a lawyer. Two, in fact. Not a single clause mentioned community use of the subsoil. No authorization for third parties to drill, excavate, or stick probes in my yard. When I returned, 3 more holes were in progress. What's worse, a group of HOA residents were watching the whole thing as if it were a tourist attraction. There was even a table with green juice and vegan cookies next to it, as if digging up someone else's land was part of a festival. I went straight to it. She was in the center of the group, with that air of plastic authority, holding a clipboard with a translucent cover, and wearing a straw hat that probably cost twice as much as it should have. "Did you authorize this?" She smiled like someone explaining a drawing to a dumb child. "Of course! It's an emergency catchment project. The Environmental Committee approved it at the last meeting. On my land? The subsoil technically belongs to the community when it's within the shared water zone. It's in the new addendum. Didn't you read it? Addendum. Shared water zone. New regulations. At that moment, I understood that the war wasn't about water. It was about power. It was about this woman's endless thirst for control. The obsession with making decisions on behalf of everyone, even when that meant completely ignoring the owner of the land. Over the next few days, the holes multiplied, 7 in total, each one with its own pipe, its own sensor, its own cable coming out from under the fence. They started installing small measuring boxes, as if they had discovered a golden water table. And the most bizarre thing, they started posting graphics on the HOA's networks about the success of the new collective fountain. Photos of my lawn with captions like, "Teamwork for the future of water in the neighborhood." I became the neighborhood's official water supplier, without even being told. My name didn't appear, of course, but the records showed where the water came from, and all the credit went to her. The muse of the wells, the architect of the shared basement. I thought about suing. I swear. I spoke to a lawyer, got some case law, but in the middle of the conversation, I realized that wasn't what I wanted, because she was going to use the lawsuit to make a fuss. She was going to victimize herself, show off. Toxic man tries to stop ecological initiative led by woman. I already knew the script, so I decided to do it my way. The next Saturday morning, a concrete truck was parked in front of my house. I didn't tell anyone. No prior noise, no notification in the group. I just turned on the mixer and let it roll. In less than 4 hours, the 7 pits were filled in. Cement reinforced to the brim. I smoothed each surface with a professional trowel, and I finished with a touch that was the face of that revolt. A banana tree planted right in the center of each block. The woman appeared in the late afternoon, her face whiter than the yoga uniform she wore on Sundays. She looked at the lawn, the fresh cement, the swaying banana trees. "You," she started, but didn't finish. I just smiled. The kind of smile you don't need to say anything about. The next day, the neighborhood woke up differently. Not because of some weather phenomenon or storm alert. It was quieter. A strange silence, like the kind that precedes or follows a scandal. Except that nobody knew for sure which of the two things was about to happen. The only certainty was something important had been buried. Literally. 7 wells, 7 concrete pillars, 7 newly planted banana trees. 7 reasons for her to grit her teeth with every step. Movement began before 8 in the morning. The HOA wasted no time. She, the muse of collective water, showed up with a support group, 3 residents who orbited around her like obedient satellites. They came with clipboards, cell phones, and tape measures. They surrounded the cemented structures like crime scene experts. They pointed, whispered, took pictures at dramatic angles. In less than half an hour, the neighborhood WhatsApp group was overrun with messages. Someone has disabled the emergency supply system. Water tragedy in the community sector. Attack on sustainability. Meanwhile, on my side of the fence, everything was going smoothly. Coffee brewing, bread on the griddle, and a sense of peace I hadn't felt for months. I watched through the window as the collective hysteria mounted over a misconception that only existed inside her head. There was no emergency supply system. There never was. It was a half-baked excuse to invade private land under the pretext of ecological awareness. And now they were without the holes. Literally. Around 10 o'clock, she knocked on my door. She didn't even have to ring the bell. The sound of her heels on the concrete already announced her arrival. When I opened the door, she was holding a sheet of paper, sweaty, disheveled, but with her usual false dignity. "We're issuing a notice of breach of community conduct," she said, like someone reciting the multiplication table. She handed me the paper firmly. It was written in Times New Roman font, with pompous terms, vague quotes from the HOA bylaws, and a signature at the end, hers, in purple pen. It said that I had interfered in a community shared water use project, compromising local sustainability and violating the spirit of cooperation that governs the neighborhood. I didn't reply. I just closed the door quietly. I left the paper on the table where it served as a support for my cup for the rest of the day. In the HOA group, she started writing long, inflammatory messages, trying to turn the facts into fables, that the wells were legalized by internal clauses, that the rainwater was collective patrimony, that my attitude represented a direct threat to the community's water well-being. He even invented that I had threatened the workers with intentional passive aggression. Most of the residents, who had previously been so apathetic, began to speak out. Some said she had exaggerated. Others asked if she really had permission to dig up other people's land. And some, the bravest, began to praise the banana trees. "It looks nice. It's given it a tropical feel. It's better than that bush we had before." Seeing that the narrative was getting out of hand, she radicalized. She sent out an official communiqué saying that the actions of sealing the wells constituted a direct violation of community values, and that corrective intervention would be necessary. She did this as if she were the mayor of an invisible city. The paper, distributed in every mailbox, came with the HOA logo in black and white, and a made-up water emergency stamp. The next day, 2 trucks arrived, one with drilling material, the other with plates and tools. Her plan was clear: reopen the wells. No talking, no process, by force. Only this time, she forgot a basic detail. Before cementing the wells, I filed a complete report with the city notary's office, attaching images, videos and documents proving the wrongful invasion. The land was mine, the subsoil was mine, and the holes had been dug without my permission. When the workmen started digging, it didn't take long for the police to show up. Someone called. Perhaps the new neighbor, perhaps the city inspector who had received my documents by email the day before. The policeman came down calmly, asked for the construction papers, read them carefully, and then, looking at the woman who was in charge of everything from the top of the sidewalk, said, "Madam, these wells are legally sealed. Any attempt to remove them will be considered trespassing." She tried to argue, of course. She said she was acting for the common good, that the water belonged to everyone, that I was a concrete extremist. But none of it stuck. The policeman thanked her, wrote everything down, asked the workers to leave, and said that any future attempt would result in a summons. That afternoon, she never showed up again. The trucks left quietly. The banana tree is still standing. In fact, it was more alive than ever. The holes weren't just concrete structures now. They were monuments, marks of resistance against the distorted logic of those who think that leadership is authorization to invade. In the days following the episode with the trucks, the neighborhood was divided into two types of residents: those who laughed as they passed the concrete banana trees, and those who pretended that nothing had happened, as if the improvised monuments were a natural part of the landscape. The truth is that, after everything, no one could ignore the ridiculousness of the situation. The woman who used to impose herself with ecological speeches and emails in capital letters now hid behind heavy curtains and cut through the backyard to avoid going near the main street. But if there was one thing she didn't know how to do, it was accept defeat. Public humiliation didn't silence her. She just changed her strategy. She started using a new term in HOA communications: antisocial obstructive infrastructure. That's how she referred to my cemented banana trees. She said they caused visual discomfort, territorial anxiety, and could inspire hostile behavior in other residents. She went so far as to write that the concrete blocks could be emitting residual heat at worrying levels during the summer, even though they were visibly passive and cool to the touch. The final straw was the new project she tried to push through at the monthly meeting: the creation of a neutral environmental observation zone right on my plot. The justification? Since the site had been compromised as a water resource, it would be interesting to convert it for visual educational use. In other words, she wanted to turn my concrete blocks into an outdoor classroom. The request came packaged with soft words, but the content was pure madness. She planned to install wooden benches all around, educational signs, and even an interactive digital totem pole that would explain the importance of underground resources. It was the most creative and desperate attempt to regain control of my land. I wanted to turn defeat into a showcase, using my response as an example of selfish resistance against the collective. That's when I realized that the war was no longer about wells. She was trying to write history backwards, to create a narrative where she never made a mistake, where everything was always part of a bigger plan for harmony. And that, frankly, amused me. I started watering the banana trees every day, with a hose, in the middle of the day, without hiding. Some people started passing by and complimenting me. "They look nice, huh? I've never seen a plant grow so well on concrete." There's a smell of justice in the air. Even the children, who previously wouldn't even look at my side of the block, started playing between the blocks. One of them cleverly named the group the 7 Towers of Uncle. The involuntary popularity of the blockos had an effect. She tried to launch a new directive banning unauthorized emergent vegetation on rigid urban surface structures. That's right, she was trying to ban banana trees. Only now, no one was willing to sign off on her insanity. People had finally understood that this woman didn't want order. She wanted domination, and she did it by dressing up as the guardian of common sense. Some HOA members began to distance themselves. The lobbyists disappeared from the meetings. Even the flyers, which used to appear in mailboxes every week, stopped circulating. The attempt to turn my blocks into a symbol of war backfired. The more she talked about them, the more people liked them. Old Jenkins, for example, pasted a sign at the entrance to the community park. Saturday is Banana Day, and barbecue at the towers. She tried to sue. Yes, it got to that point. She filed a civil suit against me, claiming that the concrete blocks altered the aesthetics of the neighborhood, caused emotional damage to the residents, and could be affecting the natural drainage of the soil. The lawsuit was so absurd that the judge himself questioned whether it was a prank. When he received the photos, documents, and history of the previous invasion, he dismissed the case on the spot. It was the final blow. With no legal support, no backing from the HOA, and her reputation completely diluted by the fallacies she had invented, she disappeared. She didn't leave her house for days. Until, one Monday morning, a removal truck parked in front of her gate. No one said anything, but everyone knew she was leaving. No one went to say goodbye. No one helped load boxes. They just watched from afar, in silence, as she emptied the empire of rules she had built on convenience and arrogance. And as the truck backed up and disappeared down the avenue, a light breeze blew through the neighborhood, the kind that heralds new times. The street seemed bigger, the sky was clearer, and the banana trees? They were still standing firm, as they should be. Her departure was silent. No farewell letter, no announcement in the HOA group, not even a pathetic attempt to explain her absence. Just the rumble of the moving truck leaving with her organic hemp cushions, her personalized clipboard with the association's logo, and all the recycled paper stock she used to print rules that no one respected. When the gate closed for the last time, the sound was so soft that it sounded like an apology in disguise. But the void she left behind wasn't one of longing. It was one of relief, like a headache that suddenly disappears after days of throbbing. Residents, previously afraid to take a stand, began to come out of their cocoon. The neighborhood took on a new life, a life without weekly notifications, without censorship disguised as advice, without that constant feeling that you would be punished for hanging your towel on the wrong balcony. The concrete blocks remained as they were. Nobody suggested tearing them down. On the contrary, they became a point of reference. The children, free from the watchful eye, painted the blocks with drawings of monsters, flowers, and even caricature portraits of the former president. One of the drawings, in particular, went viral locally. A woman with a crown made of mango trees being pushed by a giant banana tree. It ended up in a Facebook group about neighborhoods and crazy associations. She was even interviewed on community radio. The image was named the Empress of Lost Water. In her absence, the HOA underwent major reforms. The positions were renewed, the statutes revised, and a new clause was added. No drilling, modification, or access to any resident's land could be done without formal authorization, signed, registered, and accompanied by a witness. The clause earned a nickname among the members, the Damned Holes Clause. But the real finale came one spring afternoon, when a group of residents organized a kind of symbolic re-inauguration of the neighborhood. Nothing big, just a collective picnic in the central square, with no ecological theme, no clothing color rules, nothing. Just food, drink, and conversation. And, of course, a tribute to the banana trees. One of the residents, the same one who had always been quiet and was called the Invisible One from House 22, took the lead and said, "We should be grateful, right? These blocks saved us from a dictatorship that looks like an organic vegetable garden." Laughter echoed. Someone handed over a handmade plaque. "Here lie the wells of discord, now symbols of resistance and potassium." They placed the plaque in the center of the largest of the blocks. The banana tree, standing there with its leaves open, seemed to sway in approval. A few days later, I received a letter. No sender, no signature. The envelope was beige. The paper smelled of essential oil. The handwriting was recognizable. Long, slanted letters, always in cursive, like someone writing while holding their breath. All it said was, I didn't know how to respect the boundary between my cause and someone else's space. I paid the price for confusing leadership with power. I hope the next rain brings you peace. I kept the note, not as a reminder of her, but as a record of an era when someone believed they could dig in someone else's ground and still be seen as a martyr. The rain, meanwhile, fell again as usual, gentle, sometimes intense, without asking permission, without caring about invented rules. It ran freely through the gutters, down the roofs, and into the reservoirs. The sound it made when it hit the banana leaves was almost musical, and it was there, in that light and constant sound, that the real victory lay. It wasn't the cement, nor the denunciation, nor the public exposure. It was permanence, the permanence of space, of the right, of the simple no that so many are afraid to say. Because, in the end, what she hated most wasn't concrete. It was the fact that no one else needed her to live in peace. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.